Hello, I'm Big Dave, and I'm back with another review of questionable quality. This time, fucking jumping puzzles! Fucking shitty fucking jumping puzzles. Jumping puzzles on sofas, jumping puzzles on tables, jumping puzzles on objects that have curved surfaces and are such a really hard to fucking jump on! Calm down, relax. Calm down, relax. I am of course talking about Quantum fucking Conundrum. Calm down, stop swearing. You're going to get this video flagged for adults only. Seriously though, I'm going to list all the ways that this game is terrible, and yes, there will be comparisons to Portal. This game is billed as its spiritual successor, so get over it. First off are the options. You get so few options, it's insulting. Resolution and brightness. VSync is forced on, which means it can't by default record and play this in 60 FPS due to the way that Fraps works. Secondly, it is possible to change it, but you have to dig into the configuration files, and the only reason I know how to do this is because I had to do it with All Points Bulletin. This is a single player PC game made in the Unreal 3 engine. It can, and I expect it to have, a decent number of options for me to use and play with, and do not have a hard cap on the frames per second. And as I said, I did manage to fix that. But here's what happens when I changed the maximum FPS up to 150. It ran at 150, it ran really smooth at 150, but the mouse slowed down. That's right, the mouse sensitivity is directly linked to how many FPS the game is running at. Inversely. And yes, when I was doing a 3D program, I made the same mistake. And you want to know what I did? I fixed it because I realised it was a problem. Secondly, the resolution options are terrible. There's maybe 6 of them, and only 3 of them can be counted as HD. And there's no drop down menu, which means if you want to switch to one, you have to click, wait for it to change resolution, then repeat until you get to the resolution you want. This is not how you do PC gaming. It's clunky, it's not easy to use, and it's not well thought out. Thirdly, there is the long, unskippable logos at the start. Not only do we get a Square Enix logo and an Airtight Games logo, we get an unskippable seizure warning, followed by the game's intro screen, which features yet another Square Enix and Airtight Games logo. It's 35 seconds from the first screen to actually being able to access a menu. And that's 3 things that irked me right off. The game reeks of a poor console port, even before we actually play the game. Once we get into the game, we find the delightfully hammy John Delancey, who played Q in Star Trek The Next Generation, being distinctly unhammy, bland, and frankly boring.
There seems to be a large expanse of piles and pits filled with various random objects. No, not where you are. Here, in this confounded place. Are those hard candies? They're a little fuzzy. Ugh.
That's number 4, by the way. It's unfunny, it relies far too much on puns, pop culture references, and completely pointlessly long names for scientific objects. Now, if that sounds familiar, then yeah, that's what Portal does. Well, sort of. Firstly, puns can be funny if they're delivered well, and the delivery in Conundrum is far from great. Portal had 0 pop culture references, in fact it spawned a ton. As for the last part, compare and contrast. The 1500 megawatt aperture science heavy duty super colliding super button, or button, was funny because that was a mundane object given a stupidly long, overly verbose name that worked in context. The aperture science unstationary scaffold, or moving platform, was a delightful play on words. The same goes for the edgeless safety cube, or sphere. As both of the previous jokes with the added bonus of prodding and Aperture's notoriously bad safety record. Not only that, but the key words in each were simple, easy to understand, and more importantly, obvious. A portable kinetic mass to electricity converter, however, is not. It's just nonsense science jargon. None of those words screamed button, and when delivered by the laughably bored John Delancey, it's a pointless waste of time and an obvious pine towards a better game. On top of that, at the start of each chamber, Delancey gives you a joke. That is, a non sequitur with no context and no comedic value. Suspiciously similar in style to the Cave Johnson quotes from the new Portal DLC. Finding a pile of gum is not funny. Finding a pile of cell phones isn't funny. Finding a pit full of keys is random, but not funny. Having a conversation with your evil twin, bidding over the employment of the player, that's funny. Guess which of those was Cave Johnson? In general though, you can tell the dialogue was written to be GLaDOS-like. But compared to GLaDOS, who was creepy and malicious and surprisingly erudite for a machine, he's just snarky, condescending, mean, patronising, and just plain nasty. There was a personality behind GLaDOS who you knew designed those puzzles you were solving and made them deadly. The puzzles were a reflection of GLaDOS, and that really brings me on to number 5. The puzzles in Conundrum are nothing but chaos. You may well reflect the creator, but they've somehow decided that you're too stupid to figure it out on your own, and you're handheld through most of it. The first 3 hours of the game felt like a tutorial, with one mildly challenging puzzle at the end of each section before you got on to the next mechanic. I say mildly challenging, there was only one puzzle towards the end of that 3 hours that I felt that eureka pang that I got from every Portal puzzle. The problem stems from the sheer number of mechanics they try and introduce. You have very little time to acquaint yourself with something. They take the way Valve did it for Portal. See it in isolation, try it for yourself, and then give you a proper puzzle. And you made it blatantly and insultingly obvious. Rather than show you the mechanic, give you a puzzle, and mix it in with everything else, they have so many mechanics to show you that there's barely any time to mix them together. Besides the base powers, that is. The base powers are mixed in pretty much from the get-go, but environmental mechanics are generally only mixed together when traversing one of those infuriating jumping puzzles, rather than using them alongside the base powers to solve a proper mind-bending think-outside-the-box puzzle. Why is it so insulting? Well, John Delancey narrates over everything, and practically tells you how to solve the puzzle. It takes so much satisfaction out of solving things, what little there is to solve in the game. As from my initial rant, this game relies far too much on precision platform jumping, rather than mind-bending use of the game mechanics. Jumping puzzles over bottomless pits. Hell, there's times when the narration actually tells you when to fucking jump. Just as annoying as it was in Mega Man. From hopping along fast-moving conveyor belts to crossing a chasm on the backs of time-slowed sofas, they're just a lesson in frustration. Mostly because the items you're jumping on have curved surfaces, and when you miss the edge of one, you either A, plummet to your doom, or are somehow embedded half in and half out of it and cannot jump to the next platform when you get to it. There's also a number of points where things that look solid aren't solid, like the edges of some platforms. I'm not kidding. And parts of the areas are cordoned off by invisible walls. Places that by all reason you should be able to explore. They don't impact the game negatively if you would have went behind it. There's one or two puzzles that I've found that require insane amounts of backtracking through puzzles you've already solved. I know, I've solved it! It's not a challenge to do it again backwards, it's just frustratingly dull. Remember in Portal when every time you went into a room there was about 3 boxes, some tables and chairs floating about, and you could pile them all into a tower and climb to the next objective, bypassing the puzzle entirely? No? Well shit, because that's what Quantum Conundrum throws at you. You get far too many random physics objects lying about the place. The first levels practically teach you that you don't have to use the furniture to solve puzzles, and that safes are the only thing that you can activate buttons unless you have the heavy ability, which makes light boxes activate buttons. And you come to a room where you don't have heavy and all you have is furniture. Above the button is a ledge with some stuff on it, and you expect a safe to be up there. So for 20 minutes I spent trying to slow-mo surf my way on a table over to that ledge, like I'd been doing in the previous rooms, only to discover that I just had to put the sofa on the button, no heavy power required, to open the door, and what I'd actually been trying to get, which was an optional achievement item. Seriously, I had a chair wedged at the back of that button the whole time, which from my view looked like it was sitting on it and not activating it. It was a puzzle in the same way that the first room of Portal 1 was a puzzle. At this point in the game, we could just have easily put a manually powered button there to open the door and make it obvious that any slow-mo dickery was just for the glowy achievement. Sadly, it's not the only instance of poor puzzle design, it's just the most infuriatingly simple one. There's little satisfaction in solving them. The difficulty comes not from the puzzles, but from being dexterous enough to pull off some of the manoeuvres. There's a reason why Mirror's Edge flopped. First-person platforming does not fucking work. We hated it in Zen, we hate it now. The game should have had a third-person camera. The only reason it's in first-person is because they wanted to mimic Portal. Plot-wise, well, I'm not sure there is one. If there is, it's so well hidden. I'll admit that I've not completed it, but after 3 hours of playing, there's no indication that anything's not what it seems on the surface. You're in an inventor's house, he's stuck in some kind of limbo dimension, there's this dimension-popping rodenty thingy that's helping you. Your goal, apparently, is so vague you're never really given one besides turn the power back on. We're not told why, at least initially, why having the power on is a good thing. If we turn the power on, will we be able to save the professor, or will this just lead to another set of puzzles? Do we want to save the professor? I mean, he obviously doesn't like the kid from the opening narration, so it would have been just as easy to have him as some kind of GLaDOS-like overseer that just dicking with the kid because he doesn't like him. I mean, why did they have to go through all this? I mean, there's times when he seems genuinely kind and warm-hearted. He isn't set up as a villain, so I don't really see if there is a villain in this game who it'll turn out to be. Will it turn out to be the little rodenty thing that's helping you, or will it turn out to be the professor? I mean, it just seems a bit vague at the moment, so it's not really pointing anywhere. At least with Portal, you knew GLaDOS was the baddie from the start, because, you know, she was trying to kill you. Yeah, it's just a bit vague, the plot at the moment. I'm really not engaged in it at all. If 3 hours in I'm not hooked, intrigued, or at least a little bit curious, the game has failed, and I'm neither of those things at the moment, so I'm not engaged in it at all. The plot has fallen on its face for me, to be honest. I mean, he's just a voice, and to be honest, John Delancey's performance in The Next Generation was more about his physical comedy as well as his voice. And you've taken half of that away by not having him as a physical character in the game. Maybe if they'd have put him as a physical presence it might have been better, but we'll never really know. And graphically? Well, graphically it's okay. I like the visual style quite a bit, but it does fall flat some places. The fuzzy dimension in particular is so bright that it can be hard to see what you're doing, and that's not the only instance where the graphical style actually hinders the gameplay. In one example, sometimes you can't tell if there's glass in a window, especially in fuzzy. The physics feel odd. I mean, your jumping is very fast, and when you throw an object it doesn't maintain its momentum. There's one area where you have to throw an object into a receptacle, basically like basketball, in midair while flying. Naturally, I attempt to throw the basketball to the right of the hole, expecting it to continue flying with me, but no, it ignores the laws of physics and flies straight with no horizontal speed at all. The jokes are so off the mark, and combined with poor delivery and a lack of feeling, it is painful to listen to sometimes. The puzzles, well, rather than getting that, ooh, that's how they did it, sort of pang in your head is when you figure out how to solve it, it's like, oh, that's how to do it, and then you spend 5-10 minutes actually traversing the course getting the thing done. It doesn't feel like you succeed, it feels like you've just endured it. The plot is missing, and overall it really feels like a bad console port. It tries too hard, it falls flat, and that's why it's such a tragedy. There's a good game in here somewhere, but after 3 hours I can't say I enjoyed myself, and that's what makes it so infuriating. I've been Big Dave, this has been Quantum Conundrum, I'm sorry.